When it comes to the concept of stars, I like to talk about it, and I'm happy that I have the opportunity to pitch this because many people may not know about it. So I was actually so excited to put the slideshow together to talk about your star, to talk about stars. Now, a lot of the people in the slideshows are both males and females that we all know, who, based on what I can see spiritually, had very, very, very bright stars. And as a result of having bright stars, unfortunately, a lot of them are no longer here because either they got super caught up in everything and had to turn to other avenues to calm themselves from the outside pressures and persecution, or they unfortunately were taken away from the land of the living at the hands of another person. So when it comes to the concept of bright stars, I love to talk about this concept because it's a very, very powerful concept. And it's something that a lot of people, in my opinion, don't know about. So we all have super, super bright stars, okay? Not all of us, sorry, not we all, sorry. Some of us have very, very, very bright stars. How do you know if you have a bright star? Usually if you're a chosen one. People with bright stars are people who have had bright stars since they were a child. Like ever since they were children, they were always grabbing attention of others. People with bright stars are usually performers sometimes. Ever since they were a child, they were either super, super smart, or they were always performing, or when guests would come over the house, your baby would go on the table and start performing for them, or trying to get in the fridge to try to make food for them. Like, people with bright stars have had bright stars since they were children. Now, there's a lot of beauties in having a bright star, because when you have a bright star, you will naturally have the gift of influence. You will, be good at, changing the trajectory of masses, which is what people with bright stars are there to do. When you realize that you have a bright star, when you realize that you are a chosen one, you come to the conclusion and understanding that you are here for an assignment. You cannot get sucked into the world. You can't get sucked into what people are doing or attempting to do to you. You have to be extremely, extremely protective of your life. You have to be extremely protective of yourself. You have to move with caution at all times. You have to be very careful with who you let into your life, because your star is what's going to determine how much power you have, and it's also going to determine how many haters you have. So the more stars that you have, the more haters you will have. The brighter your star shines, the more cautious you must become. A lot of the people in this slideshow are just chosen ones. All of them. I know a chosen one when I see one. Trust me, I can tell when somebody has a bright star, when someone is a child of the light. I always can tell off meeting them. I can feel it. Because we can feel each other. We're able to feel each other, so we get it. But when you have a bright star, you have to be extremely cautious and careful about where you frequent, and careful about who you have around you and who you let into your life when you have a bright star. I can say growing up, sometimes I would, be a little bit angry at my parents, because growing up with a bright star, sometimes I feel like they could have done a better job with who they allowed to be in close proximity to me. When you have a bright star, you attract a lot of jealousy and envy and just maliciousness from even adults. Like, I was getting bullied as a child. I was 4 or 5 getting bullied by people in their 40s and 50s. So, the inflicting of pain on the person with the bright light, the inflicting of pain on the chosen one starts when they're very young. But again, it's part of the process. Everybody that's a chosen one or who has a bright star goes through it, because that's why you're so strong and that's why you're so powerful. So you have to go through the process. I think everybody has had the same story as far as how it starts, but you have to really, really protect yourself when you have that bright light, because, you know, your life depends on you being street smart and not letting your guard down. So let's talk about your star and how it's important to proceed with caution when you have your star and you have a bright star. So the entire notion or introduction of people having a star was introduced to me about 2.5 years ago. And when I heard the concept, I was a little bit flabbergasted, because I was thinking to myself, I've never heard about a star. Like, you know, like I've been in church for years. Like, I've never heard about, you know, the concept of us having a star. But then when I look deeply into the writings, I'm like, oh, well, God, you know, the star of David. So the Star of David. So obviously a star is a concept. But then I dug a little bit deeper, and I did a little bit more research. And do you know that we all have stars? All of us have stars that are shining at a certain shine. And some people have stars that are brighter than others. When it comes to your star, it's a spiritual thing. You can't see someone's star really in the physical. We're not all walking, like spiritually, we're all walking around with like a star that's either very bright or very dim. You don't see it physically, but you feel it. Which is why some people will walk in a room and bright up the whole room without trying. Some people will walk in the room and grab the attention of everyone in the room without even trying. And some people will walk in the room and no one really even knows that they're there. Not saying one is better than the other, but it's just the concept of stars. A lot of you guys, you're the only one targeted at your workplace because you have a bright star. A lot of you guys, you're the only one targeted in your family because you have a bright star. A lot of you guys, you could never leave your house without someone trying to come up to you, have a conversation with you, flirt with you, ask you questions. You can't even go to Walmart without someone trying to come up to you and talk to you about nonsense, because you have a bright star. When you have a bright star, you are magnetic, which is why another big example of having a bright star and being a chosen one is, let's say you go to the gym and there's 10 treadmills and you go on treadmill number 2 and there's 15 other treadmills that are empty, but the person will come and specifically work out on the treadmill right next to you. It's like you're a magnet for people. And that's okay. You know, there's a lot of good perks that comes with having a bright star, but when you have a bright star, you have to be extremely cautious. I mean, overly cautious about everything and everyone. Like, caution needs to be a middle name, literally. Like, everything that you do must be done with caution when you have a bright star. A lot of times when a child is born, there's a lot that happens when a mother pushes out her baby. There's a lot going on spiritually the minute the baby exits the tunnel. Okay. Now, I'm not going to go too deep into those concepts because, you know, for the sake of my belief system, but that's why you hear about the whole sun sign, moon sign, rising sign, you know, because all of that stuff comes into play. That's why they ask, what's your date of birth? Where were you born? What was the time? Because a lot can be found out through those things. So that's why when you're born, some of you guys are born with these specific traits. I mean, I'm talking away from astrology. I'm just saying in general. You were just born with these, like some of you guys, you know, God put the crown on you from the day you were born. Like, you have a crown sitting on your head right now, male or female. And now that you're older, you never understood why things have always been so hard for you. You know, you think back to your life and you're like, everything was always just hard. Like finding a job was always hard. Making friends was hard. Having a good bond with my family was always hard. Meeting good, like when you look back on your life, everything has always been hard. Things that were easy for other people was hard for you. And now you're in your adulthood and you're looking back and you're like, why? It's because you have a bright star. You were born with a crown, spiritually. You were born with it, with that fire in you. You were born with it, and you didn't know. So that's why so many people... The reason why I am just the kind of person where, like I said, I'm a loner. I'm really picky with people. I prefer to be by myself. I don't like having like big groups of people around me. I'm very selective with company. I just want to be around the best of the best people who are kind, with good hearts, good souls, people who are very spiritually elevated and have a deep understanding of spiritual things. If I can't have that in the friendship or whatever, I just don't bother, because I prefer to be alone anyways. But when you have a lot of good traits about you, like positive things, like you're a good person, you're kind, you're caring, you're honorable, you're honest, people don't like that. The world doesn't like that. The world wants you to be distorted like them. Distorted and dark like them. They don't want that brightness, that kindness, that wholesomeness, that light that children of the light carry. They don't like that. So if you know you have those things, that's why I always tell you guys, I always say, you have to protect your light. You have to protect your star. Parents, please. Mothers, fathers listening to me. You cannot tell me that you have 3 or 4 kids and you can't tell which kid shines brighter than the other. And it's not even a competition thing. I mean, like, not like physically, but spiritually. Like, when your baby goes on the stage, like all the attention is on her, and she's only like 5, but when she's doing ballet, like everyone's just looking at her. Like, her star is bright. It's not that your other kids aren't important. It's just you can tell the kid that has that bright star. And that's the kid that you need to be the most cautious with having people around them. Like I have a family member of mine back a couple years ago when I was still in contact with my family. I had this cousin that had a daughter, and her daughter was probably like 4 or 5 at this time. No, 4 years old. And we were having like a family, Thanksgiving, and I was looking at her daughter. Like I was sitting at the table and I was looking at her daughter, and I was watching her daughter speak. Her daughter was like 4 at the time. I was watching her daughter speak. I was watching her daughter interact, and I was just nodding my head. I was looking at her daughter. I was nodding my head, and I remember I was digging into my mashed potatoes, and I was looking at her daughter, and I was nodding my head. And then she looked at me. She's like, "What happened?" I'm like, "You got to be very careful with her. She has a bright star. You got to be very cautious with that one. Be careful who you have her around. Be careful the adults that are around her. There are adults who are jealous of kids too. I had to deal with that growing up. Grown folks that just don't like a child. I've dealt with that in my past, so I'm not ignorant to it. But I told her, I said, your daughter, she's very beautiful, one, and she has a bright star. Like, she's just bright. I don't know. Like, every time I see her in the playpen with the other children, she just stands out. It's like she has a huge, bright cloud over her head. I can't even explain it. And somebody like that attracts a lot of attention. And you have to be very careful, because even adults will try to come after her. Because when you're chosen and you have a bright star, there's no age limit as to who is going to be your aggressors. Because when I was a little girl, I was bullied by adults, I don't talk too much about, my past and my personal life, but when I was, growing up, I was bullied by people who were like 3 times my age. Like, I was bullied by grown folks. Like, I remember being 5, 6, bullied by people in their 40s. And I was 6 at the time. Especially if you have a bright star, you should be protecting yourself and constantly vetting and gatekeeping people. Because it's the star that they see. It's not even you. It's the star that they see. It's your star. And once people see your star, depending on how bright it is, that's when things go downhill. Once they recognize that you're not like everybody else, the minute they see that, they cannot replicate you. The minute that they see that they cannot be you, they cannot replicate you. They don't have the same spirit as you. They don't have the same favor as you. Once they realize that, that's when things get ugly. That's when things get destructive. So you just got to be very cautious, ladies and gentlemen. And remember to not be anyone's prey, okay? You are no one's prey.